everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah.
Happy to be in sunny times, middle of
Yes,
summer.
it is. Well, we're getting there. It's almost summer. I don't know if it's
That's
technically
right.
summer, but
No, not yet, but maybe by the time this comes out. Hey, let's introduce, we have a cool guest today.
yes.
Back to you for
Yep.
introductions.
Excited to have Bart Vanderstorm, global payroll strategist, expert, and managing partner at the Payroll Minds. So welcome, Bart. So excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Pete, and thank you, Julie. It's exciting to be here, and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, look, we wanted to get you on to talk about your new book, How to Build Influence and Make an Impact as a Global Payroll Professional, which I think is incredibly well timed, especially with what the topics we were talking about and the work we were doing at the Executive Summit there at Payroll Org Congress. I know you and I both got to talk for the source by Daily Pay shortly. So I was like, I've got to have Bart come on and we got to dig deeper into this book because I think it's just super well timed.
Hey, and look, any book
Yeah.
whose back cover starts with "Unlock the Secrets" is
Yes.
on my nightstand. I have
know.
to unlock me some secrets here.
Yes, and I've been reading your book, Bart. Like we were talking before the show about ADD. So here's how I read sometimes. I got your book. I was so excited. I just started like looking at the chapters, and I just started to dive into the ones that I was most excited about. And I went headfirst into the influence one, which I really want to get into. So I've been bouncing all around. I need to go back and read it from the beginning and
He's
read it
not a
in order.
cover to cover guy. I'm like starting with the prologue, right? Or like not even chapter one,
Yeah,
because
you
I'm
went to the
definitely
back.
a cover
Yeah.
to cover back and then cover to cover gal.
Yeah. Well, look,
Yeah.
it's great though, and really congratulations, Bart. So I want to get into that, but first, we ask all of our guests a very important question. We ask everyone, how did you get into payroll, and why on earth do you stay?
Yeah, and I think everybody gives the same answer. You know, I didn't choose payroll. I think payroll chose me. But it's also as referenced in my book. You know, I was a young guy, a young boy, must have been 13, 14, and my father he owned an accounting firm, and he was always of like there was no such thing as doing nothing as one of his children for one of his children. So he saw me wasting my time. He said, "You know what? Come here." And he taught me all the things about accounting and how accounting worked, and specifically in the Netherlands, etc., etc. And one day, he brought in a piece of software called microloan. Microloan is the name for wages in the Netherlands, and he says, "You know what? I've been outsourcing all our clients' his payroll to a third party, but I've decided we're going to do it ourselves, and I've decided that you're going to be the one who's going to figure it all out." So he gave me the box with the software, and back then we had these nice floppies. I don't know, probably a lot of
Oh
our
yeah.
audience don't even know what it is, but yeah, you had to load five floppies, and then hoping everything would work. And then and there was the payroll system, but it had no configuration, it had no collective labor agreements, it had nothing other than just the core wage types and wage codes that you need in order to be able to run a payroll in the Netherlands. And he just said, I don't care how long it takes, but you figure it out. And by the time you get comfortable, and let me know. And I must admit, from there onwards, it was my forte. And I really loved it. I obviously, like everybody else, I went from Dutch payroll into Dutch payroll for international companies. So suddenly I got involved in mobility questions and all kinds of discussions of benefits, including equity. That got me into international payroll, Benelux, Europe, and then before I knew it, I was globally addicted. And for me, everybody who says to me, I don't see me doing anything else than HR payroll for the rest of my career. It's the ability to be in the forefront of everything. It's the fact that you're in the middle of the action of everything. Meaning, I don't think a lot of people realize this, but there's not much that can happen in an organization or in a company that does not touch payroll. So if you, like my book suggests, have built influence in your organization, it actually means you'll be at the front seat, and you'll be having a seat at the table at any discussions, whether it is acquisition, whether it's downsizing, upscaling, whether it is divestitures or acquisitions. It's all of that. And for me, guys, that's the action that I'd like to be in. And secondary, I love the fact that it's a profession where you're going to be looked at. on at least a monthly basis for most of the countries in the world. Some countries like US, obviously, it could be monthly, it could be daily, it could be weekly, bi-weekly. But there will be an audience telling you whether you've done it right or wrong instantly, because clearly you're involved in their payroll, and getting people paid, and people's pay is very personal to them, and therefore, if something's wrong, they'll let you know,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what I love about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great story. I love that. You were kind of thrown into the payroll pool and had to swim.
I'm
Yeah,
still
Yeah.
picturing the gasp. Like
Yeah.
I nearly gasped audibly at the idea of handing payroll over to a 13 or 14
Oh my
year
God.
old,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
and and a software that probably still needed quite a bit of customization and
oh,
Yeah,
configuration. I'm
and Julian,
picturing people going,
yeah, and but that's the way my father raised me. He raised me to just take a chance, and he said, "Listen, there's nothing off limits." So there were more people working there. There were fiscally, and lawyers. There were people that knew a lot about rules. He said, "There's nothing that we don't know within this organization as a group. So, and even
yeah,
if we don't know, we'll find somebody who knows." And to be honest, I was really into it. I was really into discovering it myself, and my father's character, my characters, they are the same, which means we don't go along that much. We're too stubborn for each other, so it meant like either he was going to deal with it or I'm going to deal with it, but not both of us are going to deal with it. So
yeah.
it was, and I must admit, again, for me, it was the best thing that could have happened to me, to be
You know
honest.
what's awesome about that? I mean, just that unique experience, Bart, getting into it is you probably didn't feel like you knew much or anything when you started. And it
No,
forced you to make those relationships, those stakeholder relationships that sometimes people who go in feeling like they know their trade,
yeah,
don't naturally reach out and try to figure out
yeah,
how to form those relationships. And so like that was front and center for you, just based on the
yeah.
way this came about.
And I think also what also it taught me, but I only realized it when I started to become more senior in my profession, but also writing the book, which was one of my aha moments as well, which we will talk about a bit later. But I've learned that being young and being the youngest in the office, the only way for me to have people trust me was by showing them my capabilities and my abilities. And because I didn't get it on merit, I didn't get it on age, I didn't get it on the fact that I was in the profession for over a couple of years, I really had to earn it every piece of the way. And that really helped me understand that you need to be you really need to take your position and own it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think there's a great theme to that that we're going to get into about how payroll needs to begin leading more. I
Yeah.
think historically we've been led a bit too much, and maybe it's time, or it is time, I think, for payroll to really step up and start to be more of a leader. So I love
Yeah.
that. I love that path, man, and I love the way you describe that. Right, like you didn't pick payroll; payroll sort of picked you.
Yeah.
Or
I
your
think there's a
dad
lot
picked
of
it
us. Yeah, or your dad.
for you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dad.
your
Yeah,
dad
thank you.
filled your time is really all he did. He just filled your time, and you chose it, right? So, but no,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, and
it's a great path,
indeed.
though.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
loved it, and the fact that he also remunerated me for it
yeah,
was obviously a nice incentive to it as well, because I think everybody just need a little bit of money, and apart from
yeah.
all of that, just for maybe some of the younger people listening is, and I'm sure Julie and you, Pete, you had the same, but in our time when we were that age, or maybe when we were in our 20s, there was no such thing as internet or mobile phones or all that
Mhm.
stuff. It did
Oh
not
yeah,
exist. So it was a completely different different era in that fact. But I would say I don't think payroll changed much over the years, and I also don't think the dynamic of payroll changed that much over the years. It's just that the environment, the space of things, the speed of things, and the expectations increased a lot. And
Complexity.
I
Yeah.
would also say that I think with the increase of mobility, so such as mobile phones, online, internet, etc., our ability to go global or international was born as well. Because before that, it was all local. Payroll was local, and I still believe payroll is local. Although the entire universe expects us to be payroll to be global. So
yeah,
it's that's where it also stems from, if you ask me.
yeah. Exactly. No, I completely agree. We could actually probably do an episode on that. Maybe we should come back and talk that.
Yeah,
But so
back in the old days. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah,
know, I
yeah.
know. So let's talk. I love a good origin story. Tell me about the book. Like, how did it come about? What was the motivator? Where did you? What was the aha moment that gave you to come and get it going?
Yeah, so First of all, I want to give credits to Anita Letting. I'm sure you guys know
Oh
her.
yes. Oh yeah.
Clearly, she was one of my events. So, very short. I have a consulting firm in HR payroll, global HR and payroll, and
Nice.
we also host a couple of events every once in a while. And in one of those events, Anita was there as a speaker, and she just launched her book. And while she was signing all her books for all the people that were in the event, she was basically telling to me. She said to me, Bart, if you ever get a chance and if you ever have the appetite and the energy, go and write one. So
Yeah.
that really said to me at that one. I think that same week, I said, okay, open the blank page and just started jotting down my ideas, jotting down my narrative, etc. Um, I think the reason why I wrote the book also is the reason why I started my organization. And there's two main topics that I think are correlating and are also coming back into the book. One is every time I was asked for a consulting job, because I was a self-employed contractor for over 25 years, moved from company to company, always tasked with, we all know how it works. They want you to be a strategist, they want you to be operationally biased, they want you to be an analyst, but they also want you to make sure that you communicate well. They want you to know all the numbers, but they also want you to project manage the entire thing. So, in fact, they just want you to do everything, and they're hoping to be able to get all of that out of this one person being me. Now, you know, even though I might be able to do all of that stuff, my one of my main slogans is always like, I can do everything but not anything, or I can do anything but not everything is the right way to say it. So I can do one thing, I can do two things, but asking me to do everything is not always possible. So the reason why I started Payroll Minds was to help organizations to understand, but also to provide them with the level of resources that they need to be able to be successful, whether it is through a strategy session, whether it is through the execution of the strategy, whether it is through operation. So, in other words, you need a healthy and a diverse mix of the resources. Similar to, let's say, how you build a house. If you build a house, you're going to find yourself a contractor, and that contractor will be bringing plumbers, carpenters, plasterers, painters. It's not like there's one person does it all. And for those who have built a house before, everybody will probably have had once in their lives to think, hey, I'll hire this one person, he'll do it all. They'll soon learn that although it might be possible, it's first of all very slow. Second of
Hmm.
all, that person is not highly skilled in everything. And third of all, you're highly dependent to this one person. So my vision for Payroll Minds was, let me bring a one-stop shop, an organization that can bring all the skills together and provide those organizations with those skills. And second of all, which is, whilst I was always involved in these projects, is there's always a highly level of highly skilled HR and payroll folk within that organization, but they are not recognized as highly skilled people. They're not recognized as high potentials. In fact, most of the organizations didn't even really understand these people to begin with. And so, what typically happened is, if I was being tasked with the project manager role, and they told me, "Listen, formulate your team. Make sure you got a team together," I would always make sure that at least half of the people that I would work with in the project was coming from the organization. And what happens a lot is that either CFO or the CHRO or whatever would say, why are you choosing Johnny? We're not sure about him. I say, listen, leave me to it. Let me deal with this. And then half a year later, they would come back to me saying, Jesus, that Johnny guy, such a highly skilled individual. And oh my God, we didn't even know he was able to do all of that. And I said, that's right. You didn't know this. You didn't notice it. So to me,
Yeah.
those two things came together, and I said, listen, I want to build an organization that can find a place. So it could be an incubator for all those highly talented people who need a new chance, who need a new gig, who need something new that can elevate their careers into new heights, similar to that I had to go through. And second of all, I want to be that company that can provide organizations with the ideas of how do you really change your payroll strategy, how do you really work on the execution, and how do you really ensure your business as usual is captured in a sustainable, future-proof process. And whilst building my organization, 2 years down the road, I said, okay, we're making lots of headway. We've grown like double digits year over year. Now it's time for me to accumulate it all into a book and to share with the world, my thoughts on this. And particularly, I wasn't interested in providing another book about how to, do an RFP or how to implement a strategy or whatever. My book was more about how to have an influence as a payroll individual. So it's written towards the payroll individuals or the payroll professionals, but I'm also hoping that leadership who actually get a chance to pick up the book will learn what they need to do and how they need to establish their team in HR and payroll for them to be successful and for them to be able to rely on that unique individual, a unique group of individuals that actually, are at the heart of any organization. Because, of course, many people say without sales, there would not be an organization. My take on it is without payroll, that organization would not exist at all.
Get ready to turn up the volume on your HR game. I'm Jay Arnold, former musician turned HR leader and host of Backstage Pass, the HR Rockstar. Each episode pulls back the curtain on key HR topics, from leadership lessons and bold career pivots to the latest in HR tech and talent strategies, featuring the rock stars within their industries. If you're ready to shake up the status quo and amplify your impact, this is your all-access pass. You can catch the show on the Work Defined Podcast Network and wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe now and let's rock the future of work together.
So
Fact.
yeah,
Yep.
that's
Fact.
my 2 cents on that, Pete.
I agree. I mean, look, I think the latter that you described there is probably, to me, the most important thing in these books, in my report I recently did, in other efforts that are going on out there, to make executives more aware of what I would say is money left on the table, right? I mean, it's one thing to say, well, okay, we don't want to invest in payroll because we don't believe it can be a competitive advantage. Okay, fine. But understand that if you don't, you are definitely at a disadvantage in a lot of ways, right? And so I think there's got to be this sort of education of the executives of the C-suite to say, look, you need to see this differently. There's a paradigm shift here that's gone on, and it's not bookkeeping anymore. It's not simple processing and printing checks, and it's got to be created or treated with much more respect and support to elevate it, right? So
Yeah,
I
certainly,
love all that.
certainly.
Yeah.
One thing that I think about, especially with the title, which so obviously points to the payroll mind and the impact you're hoping to have on practitioners, I really think that this is also something that I hope talent leaders and business partners looking at coaching and just the angle that you have on developing talent that's internal to your organization, but might need the type of leadership and strategy, guidance to be able to shine and show what they can do is one of the most valuable and cool angles of your book, Bart. And
Yeah.
I would love to see folks take it as kind of a guide in figuring out. I probably have I'm talent rich, actually. I'm probably talent rich, and folks will leave if they don't feel challenged. And how do I begin to get them elevated to a new place in their career and seeing their worth very clearly and feeling the influence that they can have?
Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree, Julie. Completely agree.
Yeah, Bart, like we think about, like I think about how the expectations of payroll has changed, right? I mean, and I'd love to hear your point of view kind of out there on the front lines, but are we really doing enough to actually we're putting more expectations, I feel like, on payroll, saying do more, be more strategic. We do the same thing to HR, be more strategic, deliver more value. But do we actually even set them up to do that or enable that? I don't know that we are. I mean, clearly from the work, the research that I just did, it doesn't look to me like we are giving payroll the best chance to succeed. We're just sort of saying we want all of this from them, but oh, by the way, go ahead and continue to do it with outdated technology and without any proactive help. You know what I mean? And I don't know how that's going to be, how those two reconcile. I think if
Yeah.
we're going to change the expectations as they have, we've got to set them up for success and help them meet those expectations, right?
Yeah, Pete, and you know, if we ever get to work together on an assignment, you'll see. For me, thinking about, and actually, guys, a bit of scoop of I'm already a scoop for you guys. I'm already cooking a new book, but it's a for me, strategy is a loaded word. What does it mean? And most
Yeah,
people who think about strategy, let's talk about all the new stuff that's out there, and let's think about something completely different than what we're doing. But in my mind, especially if you are in a mission critical payroll process and you're owning it, in my mind, strategy needs to be about what are we supposed to do, and are we doing that, and how do
yeah,
we fix what we're supposed to do. That's also a strategy. It's about making sure that what you need to be able to do gets fixed first. Then let's look at what else can we do, and that could be another layer of strategy. And then you can think about do we want to be in the next 4 or 5 years, and then strategize that. But the first strategy that you need to come up with is to make sure that whatever you're doing today is done properly.
Yeah, agreed. Even Julie, I don't know if you saw this, but I published a micro series of blogs that Anne Marie V wrote.
I was
Um,
just thinking about Anne
yeah,
Marie as
did
Bart
you
was
see?
saying that.
Did you see the
Yeah.
one she wrote? Which and Bart, I think this is perfect for this conversation. Is she wrote this one, and I'm gonna probably say the words wrong. I can't remember how she exactly stated it, but she talked about not feeling strategic, not feeling as though she could be, or I don't want to say allowed to be. I can't remember the exact word she used, but the point is almost like a belief that she wasn't strategic as a payroll leader. I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at her resume, you can clearly tell she is, but obviously that was coming culturally from the organization or the environment. And I think we've always sort of kept payroll as a less than sort of group. Again, it's just bookkeeping. You're just printing checks. What could possibly be so important about it?
Yeah.
Is kind of the attitude. And it sort of creates this environment where payroll doesn't believe they can influence. They don't believe they can be strategic, or that they even should be, or deserve to be. Maybe, I don't know if I'm putting words in folks'
Yeah,
mouths, but you know what I mean? Like, are we doing enough to champion them, to allow them to get that athleticism out of them, right? And be that
Yeah,
strategic growth.
but that's exactly my point. And by the way, guys,
Yeah.
Anna Marie, obviously, she and I actually started at the same company
Oh,
many years ago. So, and
yeah.
also don't want to say anything else, but Anna Marie, Anita, Bart, Max, we're all Dutch people, eh? So maybe the world runs
Yeah.
around the Netherlands. I don't know, but never mind. But it's
Well, you guys are
again.
calling payroll loans, so let's just we got to work on that. We got to work on that. That's a problem.
Don't tease me, Pete. Don't tease me. No, but again, going back to the idea. When people think about strategy, they think about all the newest things. But
Yeah.
and if I take this a couple of levels up, guys, whenever I consult with an organization, the first thing I'm trying to establish with them is, okay, if ground zero is, maybe ground zero is not the right word in this sentence, but if the zero is where you're supposed to be, then let's figure out where you really are. And most organizations are -4, -5. And then, but their strategy thoughts come from zero and they think upwards to +5. And I'm saying, well, listen, okay, we can work about end state. We can think about, whatever you want to achieve. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Everybody's buzzing about artificial. What does it
Yeah.
mean? It's still to be figured out for payroll, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, like, okay, if you want to go there, let's go back. You're not at zero, you're -5, which means we first have to get to -4, -3, -2, -1. Zero, now you're ready to get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you are in payroll and when you are new in an organization and you're being tasked as a process owner to run payroll or to be responsible for payroll, make sure that your leadership, that your stakeholders, everybody involved in payroll understands where you believe the current status of your payroll organization is, because the strategy you have to outline from there onwards is to identify how do I get to the level where we're supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, to me, if you bring that discussion or the strategical discussion up to that level, and you're able to move the needle towards the zero, then clearly the organization will see the progress and starts to recognize you as that thought leader or as that influencer they need in order to build upon towards the next steps.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the aha moment also wanted to highlight, because
Yeah.
from the book, guys. So what I again, and I think I alluded to this earlier, starting my career at 14 with my dad, is what I just learned by writing the book. And I obviously asked quite some people, especially specialist people in my organization, read the book and see if it makes sense. Is that I just didn't know, or they didn't realize that the things that were so clear and so obvious to me were so uncommon or were so aha moment for them.
Yeah.
So what I consider to be normal, they consider to be as groundbreaking. So for me, it was like, holy cow. So what I assumed to be something that is normal behavior apparently isn't. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Or at least common. I mean, that they're in collaboration, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
You have your ways and your lens where things are, just in focus for you from that perspective. And like I noticed that even just in the very beginning of your book, where you're talking about confidence, and I'm reading it thinking, in some ways I mirror that. I don't know if I lead with that, and then immediately afterwards saying, well, what if confidence isn't, that's not your lens? What if that's not something that's natural to you? And that's how we all learn from each other, honestly,
yeah,
yeah,
and end up in the same circles because we find that you have something really cool that I want to learn from, and vice versa. And that's part of the secret, right, of
yeah.
elevating ourselves across the industry.
yeah,
Yeah, and I think Julie, that in that stems also. I think we were making fun a little bit about people being ADD or having OCD or having having a sheer volume of what is it being autistic. The thing is, when I talk about confidence, guys, don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting everybody to be 100% sure, because from that perspective, that leads into perfection, and that stops you from progressing. If you're trying to be perfect, listen, you're never going to be perfect. I've never been perfect, and I've never had a perfect implementation in my entire career. So what does confidence then mean to me is, and I like a bit of an anecdote out of the series Billions. I don't know if you've seen Billions, but it's there's one guy there, and he gets asked all the time when he gives the leader a perspective on whether we should invest in something, and then, are you certain? He says, I'm not certain, but I'm not uncertain. So my point of saying it is, make sure that under the circumstance, with the tools you have available to you, that
yeah,
you've eliminated as much as possible the potential of it not getting it right, because
yeah,
you'll never know for sure you'll be 100% right. And maybe for people listening from the outside in, thinking, hold on, are you telling me payroll's being run with this level of uncertainty? Then I would say, well, I'm sure that anyone who signs off on a payroll is certain that what he or she has seen is correct, but you'll never be 100% certain. Never. So confidence is about making sure that you've done everything you can within the tools you have available to make sure that what has been done is done correctly.
yeah, absolutely. Well, there's so many variables in payroll, right? I mean, just so many that are out of their control, and you're right. It's at the mercy of people putting things in. It can never, yeah. No, I'm with you.
Yeah, true, true,
Getting
true.
And yet our
flashbacks, yeah,
DNA drives us to that
to
100% certainty
perfection.
factor,
Yes, it
right?
has to
That
Yeah,
be.
perfection, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, no,
exactly.
agreed. So Bart, one of the areas that I really honed in on was the influence part of this, because I think that's probably, my opinion, it might be the hardest part about being a payroll manager and really, or payroll leader, and trying to move the ball in your organization. Because I think you're moving it against a wave of ignorance sometimes, and I always say this with respect. I don't mean that ignorance and stupidity. I mean ignorance and just not knowing. I think there's a lot
Yeah,
of executives and really HR folks that just don't really know what actually goes on in payroll.
yeah.
But how do you influence? Like, where do you start? Because again, I think Julie touched on this a little bit. Like, not everybody is good at kind of coming out of their shell and doing some of that stuff. But what's your advice there? Like, where do you start if you're really trying to do that in your org?
Yeah. First of all, and again, coming back to the reason why I started my company and also write this book, is like, some people or a lot of people may never be very strong in being able to articulate or specifically talk about, what they believe should be done, or when they have a seat at the table to feel comfortable sharing their ideas to leadership or the mid-level layers. So that's one thing to recognize. And my advice is always like, if you're not comfortable, make sure you bring somebody along who has the ability to speak, or has really understands, or can advocate or can sponsor in that area. But first and foremost, for me, it's about making sure you know your data, you understand your own perspective well enough. So I think one of the things early in my career that back then really, really got me upset, but later in my career was really something that I live by, is one of my mentors told me, listen, Bart, if you cannot explain it, you simply don't understand it yourself.
Yep. Yep.
And I was like, what do you mean I don't understand this? I fully understand it. Well, but if you cannot explain it, so I think it's important to realize that, and I think math teachers have the same issue, and some of these more difficult things to learn is the people who teach math, they just don't understand why the people who need to be taught don't understand them. It's a way of saying, in the Netherlands it has a particular word, but in English I don't know. But my point is, you need to understand your audience. You need to make sure you understand what they believe, what they know. You need to make sure you have your facts yourself together. And if you don't have the facts, then make sure you gather those facts. And third of all, you need to be able to speak towards towards the acronym of the people that you're talking to. So when you're talking to finance people, you may have need another discussion than when you speak to HR folks. And last but not least, you have to have earned their trust. And to me, the trust doesn't come with everything is 100% accurate what you do, or everything is what you do is perfect. It means you have to earn their trust, that you live by your worth, that you bring forward the facts, that you'll be clear about those things you're not sure of, and also that you're asking the right questions. In the end of the day, influence is not knowing everything. Influence is making sure you bring people along, and that you can guide them towards the real questions that need answers.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. You mentioned too in there the evergreen legacy of influence. What did you mean by that exactly?
I want to take a break real quick just to let you know about a new show we've just added to the network. Up Next at Work, hosted by Gene and Kata Keel of the Devon Group. Fantastic show. If you're looking for something that pushes the norm, pushes the boundaries, has some really spirited conversations, Google Up Next at Work, Gene and Kata Keel from the Devon Group.
Hey everybody, Tim Sackett, host of HR Famous, a new podcast on the Work Defined Network. Am I famous? No, I'm HR famous. My wife says I'm a micro celebrity, and 13 HR ladies around the world want their picture with me, which I think is funny. So, hey, what do we talk about on the pod? We talk about all the dumb stuff we do in HR in any given day, week, month, and we have fun with it, and we have some great guests. Come check us out. We're not famous, we're HR famous.
In the book. You remember that?
Yeah, so the evergreen legacy of influence, again, it's you never know. Let me turn this around. Especially when you're trying to win business, or when you're trying to win your audience, the stakeholders in your organization, you never really understand, or you never know exactly, unless you've been with the organization for many years, and then still you could be left in the you could lost in the left field. Is you never know who really is influencing who, or who really is making the decisions. Yeah. And so um, and then once you get to know, or once you do know, it's that somebody could be promoted out, or could be promoted up, or could be promoted in a completely different area, and then your whole game starts over again. So who's listening to who's influencing who, what's being talked about? So the evergreen legacy of influence is it's not necessarily the one who owns the decision who needs to be influenced.
Yeah.
And I think, in a family setting, the children always know flawlessly whether to ask something to dad or whether to ask something to mom.
Yes.
It's who has the influence for which decision. It's also me trying to say to people, like, don't take it too seriously, in the sense of, you'll learn along the way, you'll find out, and be adaptive and be agile towards any question that comes your way in the discussions. Dare also to be vulnerable and say, guys, I don't know the answer, or guys or girls, I need to discover, I need to find out.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you start smart talking, or as soon as you start to fumble your way into an argument, or as soon as you try to win an argument that you cannot win because you don't have the facts, you're going to lose trust. And I think the common denominator in all of this influence, and in making an impact, is that people need to trust you with the task. And that doesn't mean these people are certain that everything you need, but they need to be certain about you going down the entire life cycle of the entire process to become the one who actually knows, what to do, when to do it, how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, I think there's something too for as you learn or feel influence, right? And you practice it, or you learn it from someone, or you teach it to yourself in certain forms about being able to recognize it in others. And an element of success for me has been understanding influence, recognizing influence, and then being able to collaborate with other influencers, right, in meaningful ways to move mountains. And
Yeah,
I just think that that's how it's done, right?
Yeah. That's
And
where the data
that
comes in
gives you,
too.
yeah, and the data comes in there, and it also means that there's plenty of room for people to grow their individual influence factor, if there's such a thing, right? And rise and gains that as a real core competency in their own career path, and exercise it in different ways in different places.
yeah,
Is actually fun. Fun journey
yeah.
when you do it knowingly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly,
it
and
is.
it's similar. Sometimes I use the analogy of, all right, so let's here in the Netherlands and here in Europe, we obviously it's all about soccer or football, we call it, but football is something else in the US. But it's when you one day, or your kid decides, I want to play soccer, then you don't start in the Champions League. you
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
you start in the town, the town you live in, and you start to learn to play, and then you move up the ladder, you move up the levels, you become better, and then your whole team gets to play into a different league, and then a higher league, and then you get to the nationals, and then you might even. So the point of it is also that people just need to also allow themselves a bit of time, and a bit of experience, and a bit of leeway. I've in my organization, I have a lot of consultants, and many of them are highly skilled, and many of them have gone through many of the variations of what can happen in payroll, and then still, and that's the beauty of why I love my company and the way we've been and how we've developed it so far. But what I see, and this is why I know my company is at the right track, is I see people coming in with a wealth of experience, and yet they get in my organization, they get assigned to a contract, and they get back into the element of getting uncomfortable again, and suddenly finding their limits again. And it could come with tears, it could come with all kinds of frustrations. And to me, that's also always a signal of, hey, you're at your ceiling again. But it also means you can break through it again, and which means there's a whole new level behind it. Okay, and this could be with a smaller organization, could be with a bigger organization. It doesn't really matter. It comes when it comes. And also, just to Julie's point, is like, when we talk about trust, and obviously I also allude in my book about the 4 C's, which is confidence, courage, commitment, and competence. It all is correlated with trust and empathy. If you're working with your stakeholders, and you cannot show empathy to them, or they're not having any empathy with you, and you're not gaining their empathy and trust, therefore, then all of the ingredients together will not make the right the right dinner. So it is always trying to look for, how can I make little tweaks in how I behave, how can I take a little bit more time and show a little bit more patience, even though I'm on a tight schedule. How can I really ensure that everybody's being brought along? Or, and this is the other thing of it, or when do you really need to say, guys, it's enough, it's stop it, or no, we cannot do this, or listen, I'm not going to do this. And in my career, it also meant, whenever I quit in an organization, it was mostly always because I could not reconcile anymore with the direction that my leadership was pushing me towards. Now, this is not me advocating everybody to quit their jobs whenever they get a little bit of hardship, but once you get to a point where you realize this is not going to work, and I'm going to kill myself trying to achieve this, and the organization does not have the appetite for what I know is needed to fix all of this, then it also might be time for you to decide that you may not be in the right location. You might not be in the right organization for you to grow.
Yeah, agreed. I've been in that situation as well, where you kind of realize, like, hey, I'm kind of the only one here who wants to see this improve,
Yeah,
and just keeping the lights on is all anyone else wants. So
yeah,
completely understand that. You need a supportive look. Payroll can only be as successful as, in my opinion, as how well the organization enables them to be. We joked the other day about kind of the one-legged race, right? When you ever done those races, Bart, where you're kind of like putting one leg in a sack and your
yeah,
partner and you have to work together.
yeah,
I feel like that's what payroll is sometimes. You've got them with one leg in a sack and you're asking them to win a race. And it's like, well, how about if we got our leg out of the sack and got a proper sack, or whatever? I don't know. But the point is, we're tying one arm behind their back. We're tying one leg behind their back and we're saying perform at the highest level. That's not going to be possible, right? And so, yeah, I think there's got to be this reconciliation between reality and what's necessary or what's needed to
yeah,
make it all come together. So
yeah, for sure.
one of the other areas that I really was appreciative of, and we've just talked about my payroll profession confidence index around this, is just the partnerships and relationships that payroll builds within the organization, and that's where I think the influence comes into play. And we've seen just massive differences in how when executive engagement and good communication is happening between payroll and they're aligned with payroll, it's part of the culture, part of the priority of the organization. We see much better outcomes. But how do you go about, like, where do you start? I know one of the things I really focused in on was in the part that you wrote about partnerships was the painful truth. So I'm wondering if we could just start there and you talk about that painful truth and then sort of maybe just help us understand how to build these partnerships for better outcomes.
Yeah. So first of all, and again, this is for me, it's a given, and I'm
Yeah.
sure for you guys does it as well. But at least have regular conversations with your main stakeholders, and I think it's clear main stakeholders are finance and HR. At least have a regular cadence of discussions, meetings where you talk about what's really going on is the bare minimum. But then within those conversations, and it all leads up to me, in my opinion, leads up to eventually you need to be in a position where you have joint roadmaps and joint strategies, and you have agreed joint priorities. But that's the nirvana of it all. But first start with having the appropriate conversations, and then within the word appropriate lies the truth. And this is what I mean with the brutal truth is, if you're not able, or if you're not bringing factual discussions to the table, then you'll end up, and I'm sure everybody recognizes it, also the people that listen to this podcast, is you end up in arguments. And if those arguments, it doesn't hurt sometimes to have an argument, but at least make sure that you have an argument about the same thing, and always allow yourself with your with your stakeholder to allow yourself also to agree to disagree. It doesn't have to be something you agree upon instantly, but as long as you can agree to the brutal truth is, and the brutal truth in payroll means facts. What really happened. Where did it happen? Was it a timely issue? Was it an accuracy issue? Was it all of the above? Was it with the payroll vendor? Was it with our data set that we sent to the payroll vendor? You need to know the truth in order to speak the truth. And it's not about you not speaking the truth, being dishonest. It's more about making sure that when you talk to each other with HR, for example, about the data being late, let's not let it not be about, well, you remember 3 months ago this one instance, because you'll lose the argument before it even started. And by the way, try to avoid it to be an argument to begin with. Try to make it something that really is about facts. So, instead of throwing at somebody in its face or her face, it's about, listen, here's what happened. Here's what where the proof is, or the data that shows it. And now perhaps we can talk about how can we improve this, and how can I help you to improve this, so that it improves me as well, and it improves my life cycle, or my process, or my team's life cycle as well. And listen, I've never come across a stakeholder that is not willing to work with you on that. On the flip side, let's take that same analogy. If the HR person you're speaking to, or the HR team that you're speaking to, acknowledges that that's the case, it's also borne upon them then to say, well, listen, we get it, we understand it, but we either don't know, or we don't have the resource, or we believe the issue lies even further down the road, which is with either with HRIT or with our data or with our systems.
Yeah.
The point is, truth or facts, read the same, but truth or facts to me is the only real ingredient that helps the discussions to move towards the solution.
Yeah.
This is an area where I think payroll practitioners should take heart, right?
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
because they're naturally drawn to being data driven, detail oriented, engaged with data. And that's part of what makes them a great fit for payroll in particular. And so bringing the receipts is something that is comforting. And it's not in every part of an organization where the receipts matter or are even available. And in payroll, in fact, you're knee deep in data and information, and so having that as your weapon or your shield, should really make the DNA of a payroll person who's into the details and knows the details feel very good about the fact that you have tools that others don't have in the organization. Others are uncomfortable bringing data or gathering data or reading data, and it's in your DNA. It's part of who, payroll practitioners are generally.
Oh yeah, they have the skills, right? They have all of the soft skills. I really, and I think this book is a fantastic blueprint for how to activate those skills and build the other skills you need to around influence and communication and that sort of thing. So
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
yeah, this is
and guys, listen. I think, again, as you come to know me and get to learn to who I am, I like analogies. But the thing is, no argument, whether that is at home or at the football pitch with another parent or whatever, an argument will never be an argument if one of the parties, or at least the parties, talk about facts. And
Yes.
facts are facts, so it's hard to argue about a fact. The only thing then you can do next is to say, well, listen. So again, in the analogy of with HR, if HR says, well, listen, I get you, but I don't think it's my responsibility. Okay, now we can talk about responsibility. And then if there's no document that talks about responsibilities, then your presumed responsibility for HR is then the weak spot. It's not factual. It is an assumption, and you assumed wrong, or maybe you're right in your assumption, but that doesn't mean if the two don't agree to it, then at least that's your next layer of what you need to fix. And second of all, to Julie's point, is when you got facts with you, you'll not be nervous about getting across. You won't hesitate to use it. It will give you the confidence to speak up. It also will show your competence because you were able to analyze it. You had the courage, because it's not about courage anymore, because it's, hey guys, it's the truth.
Yeah.
You cannot blame me to bring the truth, and therefore, and it shows your commitment. It shows your commitment to say, guys, I know what the problem is. I am here to help.
Yeah, agreed. And you have, not, you have facts, you have a solution, and you have the skill set to come and help. I think that's, people will want to listen to that more so than just emotion,
Yeah.
complaining.
I'm hearing that old time movie clip in my head. Strictly the facts, ma'am. Strictly the
That's okay. Yeah, what was that?
We need sound bites on this
Yeah,
podcast, Pete.
I know. We have that feature here. I just never play with it. We need to figure it out.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
yeah. So Bart, one of the things that I think is going to be really critical skill set or activity in payroll going forward is going to be change management. I think that's
For
going to be
sure.
key, particularly as you start to have AI doing a lot more of the work. But so talk about that a little bit in terms of just how you think payroll can going back to my original point in the beginning, lead more and kind of get out of their shell of being led and begin to maybe assert themselves in this sort of spirit.
Yeah, listen. There's two things you're saying and you're alluding to here, and they're equally and exclusively important. First of all, change management, guys. Any project that I've done in my career always failed if it failed because of poor change management. Yeah. So even if the change that you're making makes sense to everybody, if you did not make sure that the people that are going through the change or the people that are subject to the change understand why and what happens and how it happened, you lose. It's impossible. So you need to whenever you change your project, small or big, you need to make sure that that the change is being communicated at all levels, and being communicated specifically. I reckon the number one customer of the payroll process is the employee. And so, and I've also recently posted about these things. What may seem insignificant for us may be extremely significant to the individual, and it could be a matter of $50. And so, I'm sure we all got through projects in where we knew, hey, we're going to go live with this new software, but there's going to be like 50% of the people are going to have a deviation in their payroll of, like, say, no more than $50, and we're assuming that's okay. Well, maybe not, but at least make sure you communicate this. Or simple things like, it makes sense to create a system in where we can provide digital pay slips or digital pay stubs, because who doesn't want that? Well,
Right.
maybe, but again, even if 5 or 10% of the audience is having issues with it because they don't have a computer, or they don't have a smartphone, or they want to do something different, or in certain countries in the world it's even not necessarily automatically legal to do that way. Yeah, I'm not saying any names, but France is one of those. It's not communicating to your audience, not having had the discussion about whether that change makes sense or not. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean therefore you're not going to move forward with the change. But again, you need to at least communicate it, and you need to know who are these people who are going to push back on it.
Yeah.
Because again, it's important. And then the second thing is lead more, not be led. I think that's first of all, my thoughts around these things. And sometimes you also see these things coming over the internet, is like, yeah, payroll folks are not recognized and they're not rewarded, and they're a bit of a victim. And I've never felt it that way, but I do realize that this may be a bit of the theme that's going on. In my world, it's about making the choice of taking the matter in your own hands and bringing, delivering the results. And whether that's delivering the facts and then have conversations, whether it's just delivering the result and making sure that your payroll is done the way it should, in the end of the day, you always need to ask yourself, am I a person that wants to be led, or am I going to lead my own destiny? And again, similar to having influence, similar to showing confidence, it comes, first of all, it comes with experience, it comes with drive and commitment, and it comes also with character. And the one thing that I think we didn't even talk about at all, but I think is also equally important to recognize, is the cultural differences across the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So meaning asking somebody from the east of our world is completely a different dynamic than asking somebody, let's say, west of the world. And even within the US, I've learned myself that whether you're working with somebody from the East Coast or West Coast, could completely change the dynamic of the way you have to communicate and
Yeah.
lead. So it's a combination of it all. I think it's a skill, but it's also a matter of one day. And this is, another analogy. So, how many people do we know that one day wake up and say, I'm going to take the lead in my own health, or I'm going to take the lead in my own well-being. It starts with making the decision, and that
Yeah.
decision is 2 seconds away. Of course, it's not that easily taken, but the decision to say, I'm going to lead my own destiny, I'm going to lead my own payroll process, or I'm going to lead my own work,
Yeah.
is
Agreed.
already the first step, and probably half of the step that you need to take. If you're not even considering that you want that, then you're going to be led. If you have to ask the question to yourself, am I leading? Then most likely you're being led.
Yes.
It's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems to me like, we're kind of in an instant gratification world, right? So we watch our kids grow up and they want to be basketball pros the first time they try to shoot a hoop, right? Or, you have a muscle or an opportunity and you can exercise it once, you can exercise it a few times, but none of that makes you a trained athlete or,
No.
a star. And so taking the reins means choosing to take the reins every day or in every scenario, or at least in many scenarios, right? Start with some and build it like a
Yeah.
muscle or like a skill.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just keep showing up 1% every day.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, keep showing up, and also have the discipline to continue, and don't let yourself be thrown out of the game because
Yeah.
somebody disagrees with you, or somebody. Listen, if you're leading the pack, if you're sticking your head above the cornfield, or if you're suddenly raising your hand and say, "Hey, um, I own this. I'm going to do this." Instantly you're going to be looked at, and people are going to push, and people are going to disagree with you. And if you're not up to the disagreement, or you're not up to be seen, then that's the first thing you need to work on.
Yeah. One of the things that I want to just kind of tie this back to, or round this out from, I think we should have asked this in the beginning, is you talk a good bit in the beginning of the book about vision and why it matters. And I actually think that's an area that is a big opportunity for payroll. I've not come across a lot of vision in the payroll space, and I've worked with companies of every size, some of the biggest companies around the world. Um, and I think that's an area that payroll really has to. And it's not that I think they don't have a vision. I think they're afraid to share that vision. So I wonder if you could just talk about that too. Like, how important is vision in all of this? Being able to have some sort of point of view, if you will, to say, this is what I would like to see us become and why. And then getting your executives aligned to that. I mean, how important is all that?
Yeah, so first of all, Pete, I hear what you're saying, although I do think that there's a lot of lacking vision. I think many people wake up every morning and don't really fully understand or know why
Yeah.
why they're doing what they're doing.
Well, I don't
Um,
also think that it's all entirely payroll's fault. I mean, a lot of times they're sort of handed a situation, or if you will, and say, and it is what it is, right? As well as we do, you can't necessarily change payroll very quickly overnight. There's got to be a lot of work to that, and so
yeah,
sometimes they're coming into situations where they're simply handcuffed, and I think they become afraid to
yeah.
step out of their shell and say, we should be doing better, we should be doing this, and show that vision to begin. I think it's the beginning of the influence, right? Is having the vision.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
and what is vision, And so I
Yeah.
look, I think I'd like to take this from a personal perspective, in the sense that if you know, let's say you are a payroll analyst for the U.S., and you're in Research Triangle in Raleigh, and you feel like, hey, somebody wakes up, so one day somebody decides, listen, I want to become a international payroll professional, and I want to be there in 3 years. Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's a great ambition, and it's also a great vision. And then you need to work your way backwards. Say, okay, what does that mean for where I am today? What do I need to do next, third, fourth, fifth, sixth? How am I going to get there? Um, just the sheer fact that you've put this dot in the horizon, and you accept that the road to it is not going to be linear. It's going to be ups and downs, but you at least focus on that dot in the horizon. then suddenly a lot of things that you're currently occupied with, or are troubled with, or it's keeping you busy with, or you're being concerned or even agitated with, suddenly these things disappear. Not that they're not there anymore, but you decide not to be working on that anymore, or because
Excellent.
you're on a mission, you want to go somewhere, and you don't have time to waste because you've given you 3 years to get there.
Yeah.
And that might be long, that might be short, doesn't really matter. And I think taking that back into the business is the same thing. If you step into an organization, I think the three of us have gone through this a couple of times, that what they've been telling you, the situation is completely different from what really is the situation you're coming into.
Yeah.
Or you come in as the new senior director of payroll, and then suddenly you find out you're owning a whole lot of other stuff as well that you didn't even know about. Eventually you just need to then decide, either you're going to accept it or not. And the second thing is, you need to decide, okay, if that's where I am today, where do we need to be in a couple of years from now, and how do I get there, and what do I need to get there? That in itself already opens a lot of brain power to decide what are the things I'm going to be not worried about versus what are the things that I'm going to be worried about. Listen, typical organizations that we join as consultant, they have like a washing list of 25 different pages with very small font style of issues on a list. You
Yeah.
cannot work on all of them together, and most of them are probably linked to each other anyhow. There's dependencies, there's sequentialities, there's loads of it. So working your way through this list and really being able to articulate what are the top 2, 3, 4, 5 things you're going to focus on this quarter or this year or this semester really helps you focus on the things that matter, and then being able to communicate those, being able to bring those along towards the discussions about strategy with the leadership, being able to get the funding and the resource to be able to do that, automatically puts you in a position where people start to think, hey, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. You start to show it, right? You start to prove it.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
Exactly.
it. I love it. Well, look, Bart, this has really been fantastic. I could go on for another hour asking you questions. What if anything else would you want people to know about the book, or just your work and what you're doing, and where we can reach you?
Yeah, so of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. Second of all, you can find my organization. It's called the same as the book. It's the Payroll Minds, or Payroll Minds is our organization name. We have a website. I have a personal website where you can also find the book. And this is really, my commitment to the payroll community is like I'm always willing to talk to anyone and to share thoughts and to mentor and coach. So if you're listening to this, you feel like, hey, really would love to spend a couple of minutes with him on this, feel free to reach out. And my organization, we're more and more involved in organizations that ask us to help them draw this vision, mission, strategy, or vision, and then strategy, and typically then they also ask us to implement. And if you look at it from my point of view, guys, I was a self-employed single contributor, and I always would join an organization, and then I would find my team around it, and then I would be occupied with with that particular gig for, let's say, a year, 2 years, depending on. I rarely went over 2 years because I have an expiration date. I always call it like that. But now I'm in a position. I can literally say I've created my own play garden, because I now have my fingers in 20 different organizations and 20 different projects all at the same time. I sometimes picture myself to be, let's say, Vincent van Gogh creating his own picture, but then having his apprentices around him who are also making their own pictures, and I get to see, hold on, be careful with the hand over there, and hold on, be careful with the sunflower over there. I get to speak about everything. I get to have an opinion about everything, and being the owner also means they have to listen to me, which is obviously not very. It's not necessarily something that does it that does it for me as well. It's not about the listening itself, but being able to help these guys avoid the issues, and being able to help these people to learn from it. And it's not about, one analogy again, it's not, the balance of life is not about having 50% of your work and then 50% of private life. The balance in life is to make sure that you do those things that really add quality to what you do, whether that is 5 minutes with your kid, or whether it is a 2-minute conversation with your mother, or whether it is, a whole month in Greece, which I'm going to do this summer with your
Yes.
entire family around you. It's the balance is not in 50-50. The balance is making sure you get the best out of everything you do, and
Yeah.
allowing this for my team and giving them those little tweaks and those little small advices to really help them find their own way in the journey is what really gets me up every morning with a smile on my face.
I love it. I love it. You found your calling for sure. And congratulations on the book. And thank you for what you do for payroll. And keep fighting.
Thank you.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you. And look, we got to figure out how to collaborate, the three of us, right? We'll get together at some point and brainstorm that. We've got to do some work together and put something out.
I'm sure.
Absolutely.
I'm
Great.
sure we should.
So good to have you both. And we'll talk to everyone next time.
Thank you so much.